Hey everybody, Adam here. Hope everybody's doing well. You guys are all surviving quarantine. I wanted to take a few minutes and talk to you guys about creating 3D materials for landscape and hardscape materials, right? So I made a video before kind of comparing the two and kind of showing the difference in various lighting scenarios, but just a general overview of why I feel like, uh, you know, I take that extra care and effort when it comes to creating 3D materials is because I feel like, when it comes to hardscaping, right? The creativity and the way that, let's say, those materials interact with the space in real life has to do a lot with, the fact that there are joints, right? So what is a pattern? A pattern there wouldn't be patterns if there wasn't joints, right? So the way that the pattern itself plays out, whether it's double border or inlay, or the fact that you're using a slab paver, or 6x9 and a herringbone, or an eye pattern, right? The pattern itself becomes a part of the artistry, and the pattern is supported by the joints, right? So if we're not really representing the joints to their full capacity, then the pattern itself starts to kind of dull at the edges, if you will. So my thinking is, hey, if we can exaggerate the joints and make them stand out more, that there's a little more authenticity in what we're trying to sell, right? So, part of our creative process as landscape and hardscape designers is designing the pattern as well. It's not just the shape of the patio, it's the material, the creativity. That's where you really express yourself. And being able to show that also adds a lot of realism. So, and the realism adds to the emotion, and it all ties together and adds to the sale. So is it worth the time? That's up to you to decide. For me, it was something I decided a long time ago to start doing, and I've done it on probably the past, 50 projects or something. So I'm going to show you guys how I go about doing this. So I'm going to work with something that's accessible to all you guys. And you guys can, get the Techo block. They're not the greatest resolution, but I'm going to go through and just kind of show you guys how I would make a 3D texture from a 2D image, right? So, and I'm just going to use these because they're easily accessible, like I said. And I think I'm going to do the blue slate, just because it's a really small sample size of pattern. And if you notice, each one of these is the exact same pattern. And basically, I think what TechoBlock did was make this in Photoshop, to be honest with you. So they just took images of individual pavers and arranged them in a pattern in Photoshop, and then just interchanged the photos of the paver themselves. So let's do the Champlain. I always like the Champlain gray. It's kind of got that gray beige blend. And I'm just going to drag this in like that. And so that will come in as a 1x1, right? So it's the entire texture is inside of the box, right? So move this guy out of the way, and we can get in and explode this, and then I'm going to regroup it immediately. Now, if I was mid-scene, let's say, and I wanted to make a 3D texture, and I had a texture dropped in like this, there's a plugin that is from Keurig, from my buddy that makes these Keurig textures. And let me see if I can find it here. It is... it's in tools, I think. Keurig, UV divide. So basically what this will let me do is I can divide this up, and it basically went and found the edges, and it divided up the UV grids. So if I turn it off, you can see that that's how that material was positioned in there. Now, if I would, let's say, move this over, scale it down, and now I would run that. You can see that it divided it up. It basically found the pattern and drew edges around it. So that's another way to go and find it if you've already got it in the scene. Actually, maybe I will just use this. Let me get rid of this. Let me grab 4 squares, and actually I'm gonna grab all of these right here, group them to get rid of everything else, and I'm just gonna move this over that, and I'm gonna work in this center and create my, kind of trace out the pattern here, but for all the areas that it overlaps on the side is why I have all this around here as the buffer. So I'm gonna leave everything in its group, and I'm just gonna come in here and try to draw this out. I wanna kind of stay inside the stone itself, like so. You know, I want to try to just align it with the texture itself as best as I can. And, you know, I can drop in some guides, use them to kind of give me a starting point. I want to kind of snap to my other stones to make my joints even. Now I'm going to go to X-ray mode, make it a little easier. I'm also going to reverse those faces as I go. So we have our basic pattern for one swatch of the texture. Now, there's a couple different things we can do here. We don't really need these. And I'm going to actually make a copy of that over. More copies actually, because what we can do is bring in a few different materials. So what I can do now is I want to, I'm going to basically make a pattern out of this. So there's a couple of these pieces that will overlap from one side to the other. So, you know, I might want to get rid of, let's say, or I could keep it as a square. Why don't I do that? And I'll use solid tools. If I wanted to kind of do this as a pattern, I would get rid of, you know, this is obviously overlapping to this side. So I would get rid of one side so that I could fit them together like a puzzle. But I think what I'm going to do is actually trace out this box here, like this. And I'm going to erase the pieces that are hanging out over the edge. in here and sample. And see. So actually move this up for a second. Sample that material. And now I should be able to, let me try to just paste it in there. There we go. So if it's not lined up, then I need to get in here, right click, go to texture, make it projected, and now sample it. And now when I paste it, it should line up a little bit better. So let's see, there's a little bit of an issue here, which is on both sides. So I'm going to grab both of those edges and move them over so they stay lined up, which is important. But overall, that looks okay. I might tweak this over just a hair. So basically, if I move this over, I should be able to sample that and texture it in there. Now, what I can do is, there's a couple of ways to go about this. I could either keep the joint that's there, or, you know, that's a little bit dark for poly sand. I could also retexture that. So I'm going to grab a poly sand material. Makes sense. But, so here's just a polymeric sand that I had made years ago. And I could drop that in there. And now generally what I'll do is go in and I'm going to grab just the stones. Actually, why don't I just grab everything and then hold Control Shift and double click the center. Or I mean double click the sand. So, and I actually just want to make sure I only have those edges selected. I don't want those outer edges selected either. But I'm going to do normal push-pull from Frito's joint push-pull, which is here. I'm going to use the normal one and just lift this up maybe an inch. And then I'm going to go to the sand itself, and I can use the regular push-pull for that. And I'm just going to bring that up, I don't know, maybe a ½ inch or so. All right, so that gives us a ½ inch of reveal. And what I'm going to do is sample this material, because you can see when I push-pulled that it kind of threw the texture off a little bit. I'm going to grab one of these faces, set it to projected, and that's where I want to sample the material from, and go right-click all with same material. That, and now I'm going to drop that material down there, and you can see that it kind of stretched it on the sides, but that's okay because it actually is going to have the same color from each stone, and it looks a little bit more authentic like that. All right, so if I select everything and group this, what we want is for this to be a solid. So I'm going to pull my entity info over here. So like that, I want to close that. So I'm just going to redraw one of those edges, and that should close perfectly. And I could texture that if I wanted with that same material, but that should be a solid now. Okay, so now that's a solid. And I would basically want to do the same thing for everything. So now we have our 3D texture. Okay, so we can save that. That could be something we keep in our library and just call it anytime that we want to use this material. And I don't actually even need the material underneath anymore. I'm going to hide those. Alright, so now I'm just going to take this one and I'm going to move a copy of it over. Now we have our material, it's in a group, and now what we need, all we need to do is just make it big enough for our patio size. So I have another project open, let me see, that I was working on here. And oh, I've already done the 3D texture. Let me see. Do I still have, I think I still have it underneath. Yeah, so let me grab that. I'm gonna make a copy of it. And jump back over here. And let me just paste this. There we go. So let's say, check the face orientation, it's backwards, let me flip it. Alright, so let's say this is our patio shape right here, and this was the material we wanted to drop in. It's a little big, so I want to make sure I scale it. And I like to use this plugin from Ruby Sketch that I can just grab this, grab a known measurement. Let's say, I think this is a 30 by 30 here, or 24 by 24. I'm just going to say 30 by 30, so I'm going to click twice, type 30, and yeah, it still looks really big, so let me grab that, let's scale that again, maybe it's an 18 by 18, yeah, it looks a little better. Alright, so now, all I need to do is, I'm going to move this up to this height, and then kind of move it over here into position. So now I just need to make enough copies to fill this space, right? Alright, so what I want to do is start to union these together. So I have a keyboard shortcut set up, but you basically select, if I select two of them and union them, it basically makes one group that's also a solid. So I'm going to grab a bunch of these, and it takes a little bit of time, but I'm going to union this whole row together. And then I think what I'm going to do is actually get rid of the rest of those. And now I'm going to bring this over, snap it here, union those two together. That'll save a little bit of time. And then now I can bring just those together, snap them, and now I'm only unioning that center joint together. Alright, so now they're all unioned together. Oops. So let me undo that actually, because I want to go over one more. There we go. Now I union those, and then union that to the end. As soon as it's done. And as soon as it's done, this will change from two solid groups to one solid group. And the more geometry that it has to process, the longer it takes, but there we go, one solid group. And now what I'll typically do at this point is run Fixit 101, just because it'll get rid of all of these center lines here. So, and it won't mess up the solid. So let's run that. Okay, there we go. And you see how cleaned up 1900 edges, which is great. Okay, so now we want to get our shape that's underneath, and we're going to bring that up like so. Okay, and I'm going to actually texture that with this material. And I'm going to group it so that that's also a solid. I'm just going to move it down just a little bit. And now I just want to select both of these, and we're going to do an intersect. And that's it. That'll cut it out. We'll have a shape that we need. It'll be in 3D. So all in all, it's pretty simple. the process. We're just kind of tracing out the pattern, making sure that we pay attention to where it lines up on either side, and then we're just going to copy it big enough to fit that space. There we go. So, sometimes you want to be mindful. I don't like these little sliver pieces, so I'll look for that stuff before I do the intersect, but I'm not going to worry about it now. And I'll try to shift this over and split the difference between that end and that end, just so we don't see those little sliver pieces. But I'm going to turn off the edges, and that's where you can really kind of see the difference here. And let's turn on shadows. Huge difference if I just have this space here with just the 2D texture. You can definitely see the difference of how that plays out, where it really picks up those joints. And is it worth it? That's up to you to decide. For me, it's worth it, especially if you're rendering and you're getting into lighting and all that stuff, and it really starts to cast a great shadow and how it looks over in Lumion or Enscape or any of those softwares. It really makes a big difference. So that's it. That's how I go about doing it. And now, from here, essentially what I would do is go through and probably make the rest of these and then save them. So now I have the whole blue Techoblock Blue series saved in all different color blends as 3D textures that I can just bring into a scene. Instead of bringing them in through the material window, I will bring them in through the component window. And you can see I actually have a bluestone here, and this is what I used to make this. Did it the exact same way. So this is a small little thing I just did. It took me a couple hours just visualizing this pergola, but that's exactly what I did. It's exactly what I showed you. I just pulled it in from the file that I had saved already. So you can save those instead of bringing in your materials from your material window. You'd just be bringing them in from your component window. So you create a folder. I have one called 3D Hardscape. Once I have those, I can right click, make sure they're a component, and save as, and then just go and save them into that folder. So I'll go through and finish making these, and then maybe I'll share those with the group, but hopefully you guys can level up your material game in representing your materials and how they look overall. So let me know if you have any questions, but that's the easiest way I think to do it, just using solid tools, and that way, it's just essentially a quick cutout. You don't have to do, it saves a couple steps versus the old technique where I would do things in 2D, cut the shape out in 2D, then have to run joint push pull on every single stone, and that takes a long time. So this is a little bit faster, and I think a little bit cleaner overall, because I still have a solid group here. So yeah, that's all. Let me know again if you guys have any questions. Hope you guys are doing well and surviving the apocalypse.